2000s, now rapidly fading to the abyss of the past, were a unique time to be alive. A time in which anything felt possible. The exact shape of the future was unclear, but we opened every door in search of it. A time in which technology was met with optimism. Every step forward seemed to make life easier and better. Innovation was in the air. I mention this time period because both myself and this bike are products of it, shaped by it. This is a 2008 Ridley Helium ISP, a bike that, in my opinion, perfectly captures the spirit of this bygone era, a bike whose story I'd like to share with you today. A friend of mine at work came to me and asked, "Hey, do you like old bikes?" My mind raced to the Bridgestone RB1s and Schwinn Paramounts I used to lust after, the old bikes of my youth. "Yeah, I love them," I blurted out. "I'll bring you one tomorrow then," he said. "I haven't ridden it in years." You can imagine my surprise when he wheeled this in the next day. If this is an old bike, I wondered, how long has it really been since the 2000s? Turns out, quite long. The funny thing about the past is that it just seems to always be a little further away than you remember it. You think it's just there, within arm's reach, and yet, when you reach for it, it isn't as close as you thought. I brought the bike home and placed it between my two other road bikes, my 2016 Cannondale Super 6 Evo and my 1997 Ibis Spanky. The Cannondale, at least in my perception, has always felt modern to me. It might not have disc brakes, but it feels right at home with the bikes I find zipping about on Saturday morning. "Hey, nice bike," is a common utterance I hear while riding it, usually from someone riding a similar frame. On the other hand, "How old is that thing?" is much more frequently heard when I take the Ibis out for a spin. That one, people have firmly placed in the vintage category. This Ridley, however, seemed different from the other two bikes that it sat between. It felt like a kid caught between two generations, too young to be of the 90s, too old to belong to the 20-teens, one of those tween generations that just cannot seem to fit into either side. The Ridley lacks the passionate handmade nature of the steel steeds of old. There is no imagery of the dedicated frame builder here, no sparks flying as a tube of lightweight Columbus or Reynolds tubings meticulously cut to size, no intricate lug work that took someone hours and hours to perfect. But on the other hand, it also lacks the cold, corporate nature of many of today's bikes. It doesn't scream marketing with the latest buzzword promising percentage gains. It doesn't reek of a frame built to a specific price point to capture an exact niche of a saturated market. To me, this bike exemplifies the bygone era in which I came of age. This bike is the 2000s. The 2000s gave us the iPod, TiVo, camera phones, Netflix, Facebook. No longer did we have to buy CDs, watch commercials, develop film, drive to Blockbuster, or wait for our sibling to get off the phone to talk to our friends. It seemed that with every passing year, technology made our lives easier and better. It felt like the dawn of a new era, one in which innovation was the key to the future. Optimism was the quintessence of the time. Those who were pioneering these new inventions were not afraid to take risks. They each sought to outdo each other, not through conformity, but by pushing to make the next big splash. There were some terrific hits, the iPhone, YouTube, the Wii, big ideas that paid off. And there were some duds, Song Airlines, Segway, the Pontiac Aztek. But regardless of whether these were hits or flops, they all started with the goal of pure, optimistic innovation. Nowadays, it feels like the majority of the companies that people start are intended to just be good enough for a bigger company to take notice, worry, and then buy them out. The purpose is never to truly disrupt the industry, one of my all-time most hated Silicon Valley terms, but rather to just be innovative enough that Amazon, Apple, Google, or Facebook will throw a few $1,000,000 at the founders in order to keep the idea from cutting into their profits. The big company gets to keep their margins, someone gets to write entrepreneur on their LinkedIn bio, and the rest of us, well, we get one less idea out there, one less possibility for the future. This is not the optimism of the past, this is the cynicism of today. And yet, despite currently living in this time of division and pessimism, as I started to work on the Ridley, I was transported, at least for a fleeting moment, back into that time of hopefulness. The Ridley Helium was developed in 2008 after Cadell Evans went to Ridley and told them, "Make me a bike on which I can win the Tour de France. And do me a favor, bring it as close as possible to the 6.8 kilo limit, but if in doubt, weight should never be at the expense of stiffness." And so this is what the engineers at Ridley came up with, the Helium ISP. That year, Evans pulled off an unexpected second-place finish at the Tour, and the Helium became a legend. Ultimately, the idea of the Integrated Seat Post, or ISP for short, was a flop. It belongs in the same drawer as the Zune. You can't loan the bike out to a friend that is much shorter or taller than you can't take the seat post out to travel with the bike, and good luck finding a replacement seat clamp now. But in hindsight, at least they tried something different. At least they dared to innovate. Maybe the ISP was not the big economic success that Ridley hoped for, but the bike itself, that was a winner. It defied the odds to claim that podium spot, and it showed the world that innovation doesn't always pay, but innovation can win. However, despite the ISP ultimately being a flop in the long term, it is also what most evoked the early 2000s in this bike. The idea of an integrated seat post, one that, in the pursuit of stiffness, lightness, and aerodynamics, eschews practicality and adjustability, is reminiscent of one of those moonshot ideas and innovations of the knots. While Ridley was not the first manufacturer to employ such a design, the design itself is a product of the desire to do things in a unique manner. Today, it feels like most of the technology between brands lacks true diversity. Smartphones all look and function the same, electric cars continue to edge closer to conformity, and even bikes and bike components today seem to just differ in the minor details. Companies today seem to be afraid of big ideas, afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of zigging when the competition zags. Unlike the spirit of yesteryear, today, to dream big is to risk, and risk is too risky to the profits. I ended up spending most of my winter holiday working on this bike, breathing what life I could back into it. During those peaceful hours spent meticulously tending to every component on the bike, I was transported back to those hopeful days when the future was bright, when anything was possible, when we dared to dream. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the process. and we are out here on the maiden ride of the Ridley Helium. Now, I gotta say, I am really impressed with this bike. It handles incredibly sharply. It really does feel like the race bike that it was designed to be. It's kind of hard to fully explain, but when you sort of shove it into a corner at a speed that's a little bit faster than what you think you should go into a corner with, it just eats it up. Like, it just darts in there with incredible precision and just gets you around the corner faster than you think you should be able to. In addition to that, the frame is really stiff. You can really get all of your power down when you're pedaling this bike and translate it into speed. The bike's also just really impressive descending as well too. It just darts into corners, it holds the line really well, and it's overall just an incredible frame, I have to say. I didn't expect it to be this good, especially being a 16-year-old frame. You know, I won't say outdated geometry, but you know, geometry from a different era that prioritized different things. And it's just really solid. It really is an awesome bike, I have to say. All in all, this project has been a lot of fun to work on. It was my first time working on a Campagnolo group set. I really enjoy riding it. The shifts are really smooth. I did think the thumb shifter would be a little bit hard to get used to, but it's actually pretty intuitive. Yeah, you know, all in all, this thing rips. It's just a good bike. I'm incredibly thankful for my friend giving me this bike. It was very generous of him. And like I said earlier in the video, it reminds me of a different era. An era in which innovation was a little bit more for the spirit of innovation, right? A little bit less cynical maybe. And an era in which it seemed like anything was possible, in which we didn't really know which direction we were going in. There were a lot of possibilities with technology, not just with bikes, but I think the spirit of society was a little different back then. I really do think that the early 2000s represented a more hopeful time in society, and that might be a little bit cliche to say, it, you know, probably is, but I really do feel that way. Not just because I grew up in that time period, but it really did feel different. At the end of the day, this is just a bike, obviously, right? It's, you know, we're definitely personifying it by waxing poetic about all these things, but I really do think this frame, this bike just sort of captures the spirit of a bygone era, right? The early 2000s were a time in which I really feel things felt more possible, right? The world hadn't really yet picked the course that it's on nowadays, it seems like. Technology and all sorts of things really seemed like they were more up for debate. We were still trying to find our answer, and things were being made. Innovation was being done in the spirit of making things better, not in a sort of cynical way like I think sometimes they are done today. Like I said, it is just a bike, but through my whole process of, you know, restoring this bike, rebuilding it, maintaining it, riding it now, it made me reflect on those things. And I do think it does sort of capture that spirit I'm talking about here, that spirit of a change in the way we view technology and progress and innovation and stuff like that. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. It's been a lot of fun. If you haven't done so and you wouldn't mind, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It would help me out quite a bit. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.